One full week in the books, and the contenders are already separating themselves out from the pretenders. You'll watch it right on ROQ College Sports. Welcome in. You are watching right on ROQ College Sports. I am Tyson Quiller, your host, and thanks for checking us out. That last video we put out, that right on Q Buff Spot scathing review of the University of Colorado football program, kind of got a little traction, up to about almost 300 views. I think the last time I looked. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this content with anyone you think might find it interesting, and send me your feedback. I'm always going through that feedback, looking for tips as I can kind of grow this podcast, or suggestions about different topics, maybe different games to cover. Please feel free to send me your feedback. Always welcome. And so today, man, this past Saturday, did it not show us why we love college football so? I mean, I can't count how many phenomenal games. And then in the case of like Georgia, you just saw pure excellence on display. I think it's fair to say that they're in the conversation of the same echelon as Alabama at this point, but we'll get to that in a minute. Before we dive into the recap of each of the games, let's start things off with some kind of new and developing news. Now, pretty much all discussion about this has been speculation to this point, so take it with a grain of salt. But this story we're about to go through comes courtesy of Athlon Sports. Quote, "The college football playoff is officially expanding after a year delay following an initial announcement of expansion in 2021. The Board of Managers voted unanimously for a 12-team format at the end of last week. Beginning 2024, 2025, or 2026, real specific, guys, the playoff will move from a 4-team setup to the 12-team version. Sounds like it's still not quite solidified yet, but more indication of what is to come. So here's a proposed kind of look at the next college football playoff system. It'll be the 6 highest rated conference champions in the college football playoff committee's final rankings. They will be awarded an automatic bid in the 12-team field. The rest will be filled out, selected from the next highest rated 6 teams. Seeding will be based upon ranking in the college football playoff polls. And here is how it would have played out last year. The field would have been comprised of the top 12 teams in the rankings. Just kind of worked out that way last year with the poll. 6 of the 10 conferences represented, including all 5 Power 5 champions, 3 of the 6 conference champions on one side and 3 on the other, as well as the best independent team in Notre Dame. Now, all 3 Big Ten teams are on the same side of this bracket, so they would likely do some adjusting. But you can see there are some very compelling matchups in the first round here. The Rose Bowl matchup with Ohio State and Utah. How about Notre Dame and Pittsburgh? Now, they haven't released everything involved in the format, but I'm assuming the first round games would be played at the higher ranked team's home field, and then the remaining 6 games before the national championship will be played at the Rose, Sugar, Orange, Fiesta, Cotton, and Peach Bowls. The championship game would likely be hosted by one of those 6 locations, kind of on a rotating schedule each year, likely 2 weeks after the semifinal games. Very interesting. Now let's dive into the recap of a phenomenal slate of games we had this past weekend, starting with a couple of real fun ones on Thursday. After an 11-year absence, we retreated to the 105th edition of the Backyard Brawl last Thursday night. Now, as you know, I was kind of very high on Pitt coming into the season. Yes, they lost Kenny Pickett to the NFL and Jordan Addison through the transfer portal to USC, but the vast majority of their remaining production was back. The question really was kind of how does Kedon Slovis assimilate into this offense? And the answer in this one was pretty roughly. This offense was very jerky early, and the schemes were just kind of bizarre. Pittsburgh worked in a fullback on several first down plays. It just didn't seem like they had an identity on offense. It really was a grind for both teams on offense in the first quarter, with a combined 5 punts, 2 fumbles. 10-10 was the halftime tally. And West Virginia, I must say, in this game, they were really holding their own. But you kind of had this feeling Pitt was going to unleash in the second half. Sure enough, they come out of halftime, 3 plays, -5 yards. It's a 3-and-out punt. You're going, what is going on with the Pittsburgh offense? As they're lining up to punt, here comes C.J. Donaldson, and he blocks the punt, setting up the Mountaineers at the 5-yard line. Man, Donaldson was really the player of the game in this one. The backup running back had 7 carries, 125 yards rushing, and this block punt. I mean, secret weapon, right? It wasn't until 5:54 left in the third quarter that the Pitt offense finally found pay dirt again as Daniel Carter punched it in from the 1-yard line, tying the game up at 17-17. Now, the Panther O-line just got pushed around for the entirety of the first half by big Dante Stills and that Mountaineers D-line. But, Pitt kind of settled in with the power running game late in the third quarter, and they took the lead with a Rodney Hammond touchdown run at the end of the third, 24-17. But West Virginia swung back with back-to-back touchdowns and defensive stops, retaking the lead 31-24 with a J.T. Daniels 1-yard QB run. Kedon Slovis and Kanata Mumfield then hooked up several times as Pitt tied things up at 31 with just 3:41 left in the fourth quarter. For a game that was largely bland through the first 2.5 quarters, the slugfest had commenced. So it's 31-31, 3 minutes left. J.T. Daniels throws the ball to the Mountaineers' best receiver all night, Bryce Ford-Wheaton. I mean, to this point, he had caught 9 balls for 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Sure enough, he tips it up, and M.J. Devonshire returns it for a touchdown. The only problem, Devonshire is on scholarship at Pittsburgh. Just brutal. Hey, listen, J.T. Daniels played a heck of a game. On the final drive, Pitt's Mike linebacker, Servasia Dennis, came up huge as the Mountaineers turned it over on downs. Hey, man, I was very impressed with West Virginia. I'm intrigued now, though, what the combo of J.T. Daniels and their new offensive coordinator, Graham Harrell, can get cooking come conference play. What I'm not impressed with is the Pitt offense, and especially Kedon Slovis at quarterback. He did end up with over 300 yards passing, but only 1 touchdown pass. I mean, that ain't going to cut it. But ultimately, what a great game. Are we not super pumped to see this rivalry reignited? Now, the night game last Thursday was Penn State traveling to Purdue. The Purdue fans held a blackout, and the atmosphere was electric. Now, remember, the last time they did this was in 2018, and they knocked off Ohio State by 29 points. And how about those helmets, by the way? Pretty freaking sweet. But this one, too, got off to a sluggish start early with 3 punts. Purdue finally broke through with a 36-yard field goal, just 3:38 remaining in the first quarter. They then traded touchdowns early in the second quarter, Penn State scoring on a 12-yard pass from Sean Clifford to Mitchell Tinsley, and then Purdue responding to take the lead back at 10-7 with a King Doerue barreling 3-yard touchdown scamper. But this was kind of when Penn State flexed, finishing out the first half on a 14-0 run. I didn't see it coming. I think I had Purdue rated quite a bit higher than Penn State. And, man, James Franklin and the boys showed they belonged in this game. With just 30 seconds left from their own 18-yard line, the Nittany Lions decided to go for the dagger. Clifford connects with tight end Brenton Strange. The big man, 67 yards for a touchdown. A game that Purdue was winning with just 6 minutes left until halftime. They were now down 11. But you know how college football goes. Purdue then came right out of halftime and scored. They did put together quite a comeback, but Penn State forced Aiden O'Connell into short pass after short pass, just eating up the clock. The new defensive coordinator at Penn State, Manny Diaz, called a phenomenal game. And one other point, That Penn State punter is the truth, booming kicks and flipping the field, forcing Purdue to go the length of the field each time. That one he punted that died at the 1, and then his coverage unit just pushed it into the end zone. Just brutal. Remember the name Barney R. Moore. Ultimately, Purdue came all the way back. They went up 3 points and then got a defensive stop. So you get the ball back, 6 minutes left, up 3, and they passed it 8 straight times. Only used a minute 30 off the clock. Just a 38-yard punt sets Penn State up at the 27-yard line. I mean, this was a game that was just clearly mismanaged by Jeff Brom. There's no other way really to look at it. The swings in this game were just unbelievable. After Purdue had taken back the lead, Clifford and Franklin put together a master class in a 2-minute drill, marching right down the field to score the winning touchdown with just 57 seconds left. I mean, Purdue did get one more try with 50 seconds left, but I mean, what happened to Aiden O'Connell? He was just super cautious with short passes all day, taking checkdowns. The run game kind of got going, but the pass game was just off schedule all day. He averaged just 6.1 yards per pass. I mean, he did get 356 yards passing ultimately, but one touchdown pass? Really? Really? I think Purdue has some real questions to be asking themselves. Now, I don't know what was in the water in the Tar Heel State this weekend, but there were a couple of complete thrillers. First, number 13 NC State traveled to East Carolina. After going down 7-0 in the early going, that NC State 3-3-5 defense locked East Carolina down, and the offense finally got clicking. Wolfpack quarterback Devin Leary passed for 62 yards on their third drive of the game, capped off by a 12-yard touchdown pass to Thayer Thomas. The big play of the first half came on East Carolina's next possession, though. The NC State D held Carolina to a 3-and-out, and as punter Luca Larson received the ball, you're watching it right now, Josiah Provillion and company came barreling through the line to block it. I mean, look at this. I mean, any one of like 4 guys could have blocked that punt. Ultimately, Sean Brown scoops and scores, and NC State took back the lead. The Wolfpack defense continued to flex phenomenally. I mean, outside of that one 7-play, 70-yard touchdown drive early on, the defense just gave up 5 first downs and came up with 2 huge interceptions in the first half. Just before halftime, Leary led the offense on a 12-play, 85-yard drive, eating up about four of the final 5 minutes of the first half. And NC State went up 2 scores on a 24-yard touchdown run by Demi Sumo Karmbe. The route looked like it was on, but the script flipped completely in the second half. All of a sudden, that vaunted defense for NC State could not get stops. The Pirates converted on 3 third downs as they advanced and scored, making it a 7-point game. NC State's final 4 possessions of the game went as follows. Their final 4 possessions of the game: a fumble, a turnover on downs, interception, and a punt. And that turnover on downs, by the way, 6 straight plays they were stopped on the goal line. East Carolina defense just bowed up and had one of the most phenomenal defensive stands I've seen in a long time. But man, I have to tell you, all this hype for Devin Leary, I mean, he was named preseason ACC Player of the Year, and he finishes the game with just 211 yards, 1 pass touchdown on 51%. What? Leary came up super small down the stretch, and the Wolfpack did everything they could to let East Carolina back into this game. After Leary threw that interception with just 5 minutes left in the game, East Carolina had the ball down just 7 at NC State's 27-yard line. And then, even better, the Wolfpack defense gets called for PI, moving the ball all the way down to the 12. And I mean, the crowd was just really starting to jump and rock at this point. It was loud. It looked like NC State had no momentum. East Carolina was going to cruise in and tie it up. 3 runs later, the Pirates scored, so they lined up for the extra point. And you know what's next. There's only one reason to mention an extra point. He pulls it so hard, and all of a sudden, the stadium just went silent. So it's NC State's ball, 2:49 left, up 1 point on that missed extra point, and supposedly some great quarterback. Easy chance to salt this one away, right? Well, you have a run for a loss of 3 yards, incomplete pass, and a 3-yard completion. Just an abysmal attempt at trying to run the clock out. 3 and out, and the Pirates get another hack at it. They put together a 6-play, 47-yard drive. Ehlers had a couple of huge completions to Keaton Mitchell, and with 9 seconds left, the whole time they're doing this drive, I'm going, you need to score a touchdown. 9 seconds left from the 24-yard line. Owen Daffer lines up for the game-winning field goal, and let's watch this together. Yikes! So, NC State snuck out with a win. How did the Tar Heels fare against App State? Well, in this one, it was just straight up defense optional. North Carolina gave up 567 yards on defense, but not to be outdone, Appalachian State gave up 649 yards to the Tar Heels. There were 7 touchdowns in just the first half. So taking the field in the second half, up 28-21, Mac Brown's squad marched right down the field, 8 plays, 75 yards. They go up 35-21 on a Drake May rushing touchdown. Man, that is so ugly. That is just slow motion. Where's the defense? Where is the defense? Then, after an interception by Cedric Gray, Noah Burnett bangs through a 44-yard field goal, 41-21, and the route was on. Are you beginning to sense a theme here? There would be 62 more points scored in this game. Yes, you heard me correctly. So we'll fast forward a little bit. Down 55-63 with just 28 seconds left, App State went 2 plays, 48 yards, touchdown in just 10 seconds. I mean, you have to go back and watch the end of this game. It was phenomenal. But like I said, completely defense optional. I mean, ultimately the game was not decided on some great defensive play, but decided on a dropped pass by a wide open App State wide receiver as they went for 2 to tie the game up. I mean, you can't write this stuff. Quick rundown of the stats in this one. For UNC, with their first team all-conference wide receiver Josh Downs out with an injury. Okay? So he didn't even play. Quarterback Drake May still threw for 352 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also rushed slow motion, mind you, 76 yards and a touchdown. App State's quarterback Chase Bryce threw for 361 yards and 6 touchdowns. And their running back, Nate Noel, rushed for 119 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. These two teams accounted for 124 points, over 1,200 yards of offense. These offenses are going to be incredible, but the defenses are awful. Now, let's turn to the game that probably a lot more of you care about, but it just wasn't even close from the jump, so I'll kind of breeze right through this one. Number 11 Oregon traveled to Georgia to play the number 3 Dogs at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. There was a ton of speculation about how Georgia would replace 15 NFL draft picks from their team a year ago. Side note, yes, Dad, you were right. It was 15 NFL draft picks. Well, the short answer, Bo Nix is now 0-4 versus Georgia in his college career. Listen, there's a lot of hype about Oregon hiring Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning in the offseason, but like I've told you about, like Lincoln Riley and others, like these things take some time. Schemes were not the problem in this game. Oregon just got completely outmanned. The Georgia defense held the Ducks to just 55 yards on their first 2 drives, then capped that off with back-to-back interceptions. Meanwhile, the Dogs' offense was just workmanlike, scoring a touchdown on each of their 4 drives in the first half. 12 plays, 88 yards, 7 plays, 92 yards, and then right before halftime, 8 plays, 75 yards. I mean, the Ducks just got manhandled at the point of attack. It was Bennett to McConkey for 11 yards here, then Kendall Milton on the ground for 10 yards there, then Bennett to McIntosh for 17 yards. Oregon could do nothing to stop it. This Georgia offense really looked seamless in this one. So the score was 28-3 Georgia at halftime, but it may as well have been 1,000,000-3 with that defense. This Dogs defense gave up just 313 yards in total, and Oregon crossed the 50-yard line just once in the second half. That is outstanding. Meanwhile, their offense went 9 for 10 on third down conversions and piled on another 3 touchdowns in the second half, 49-3. Wow, that was dominance. And I think you can maybe now consider Georgia in kind of that highest echelon with Alabama. I mean, you lose 15 starters to the NFL and do that in week 1. That's very impressive. Now, sticking with the SEC, number 23 Cincinnati traveled to number 19 Arkansas. Now, I know Woo Pig Sooie won't like this take, but a lot of people are saying this close win proves Cincinnati is really good still, considering all the players they lost. My assessment was kind of completely the opposite. Maybe Arkansas isn't as good as expected. I mean, Cincinnati had 9 starters from the 2021 College Football Playoff team that were drafted into the NFL, including the best quarterback in program history, Desmond Ridder, and like half of their defense. And they haven't had a top 40 recruiting class ever. Even their 2022 class, after that miracle season, was just 42nd in the nation. That looks more like a recipe for rebuild, not reload. Plus, you know how high I am on Houston this year in that conference, but we'll get to that in a minute. Arkansas had control of this one from the jump. After Dwight McLaughlin picked off Ben Bryant and ran it back 51 yards, it was the KJ Jefferson show. 20-yard pass to Matt Landers. He then punched it in with a 15-yard scramble. You know, Jefferson really had a pretty impressive game. I mean, nothing that will blow you away, but serviceable. 222 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, 62 yards and a touchdown on the ground. No turnovers, though. No turnovers. But really, at times, both teams looked pretty stagnant. There were 17 penalties in this game, 2 turnovers. Since he did try and make it a game in the second half, scoring on the opening drive to kind of crawl back within 7, and they ultimately got as close as 17-21 with about 5 minutes left in the third, but they really felt the loss of that talent and experience on the defense down the stretch. The junior linebacker Ivan Pace played, really pretty tough. He collected 12 tackles, 3.5 of those were for loss, but he just couldn't do everything. And the Razorbacks leaned on that D-line. I will say, I'm impressed with the stable of running backs at Arkansas. Raheem Sanders went for 117 yards in this one, but the defense really struggled in the second half. Like with Ivan Pace, Arkansas linebacker Bumper Poole did have a good game, 13 tackles, but the Razorback defense gave up 325 yards through the air. This secondary is pretty suspect. All right, now we'll be getting to the Notre Dame-Ohio State game here shortly, but first, what I think was unquestionably the game of the weekend on Saturday, number 24 Houston at University of Texas San Antonio. But first, let me set the scene for you a bit. UTSA started its first season ever playing football in 2011. The entire school was only founded in 1969. They had the nation's leading rusher in Sincere McCormick in 2020, and then they jumped into the top 25 last year in Week 8 for the first time in program history. The Roadrunners would remain in the top 25 for 4 weeks, getting as high as number 22 after they started off 11-0 last year. They finished the season 12-2. Now, after dropping a terrible loss against Texas Tech at the start of the season last year, Houston clawed their way back into the top 25 by week 12. They, too, finished the season 12-2 and went on to defeat Auburn in the Birmingham Bowl and ascend to a ranking of number 17 in the nation. I think we're witnessing a real-time birth of a new college football rivalry here. This game was so much fun. So in our conference previews, I told you that Fresno State and these 2 teams were likely the best group of 5 teams in the country, and we were treated to a phenomenal game on Saturday. After the Houston quarterback Clayton Tune connected with Tank Dell to put Houston up 7-0, the Roadrunners defense pretty much locked them down for the remainder of the first half. Meanwhile, UTSA's quarterback Frank Harris got cooking at kind of right about the same time. A 51-yard touchdown pass to Joshua Cephas, followed by a 38-yard touchdown scramble from Harris for a touchdown. It really kind of showcased that this dude is a bona fide future pro. The Cougars' offensive woes continued as they went 3 and out on their first 2 drives of the second half, and the stadium was just like rocking in San Antonio when the Roadrunners' 10-play, 73-yard drive was capped off by a DeCorian Clark 15-yard touchdown reception from Harris, putting the Roadrunners up 21-7 at home. Yeah, you got to remember now, UTSA has never beaten a top 25 team in the history of their program. I mean, these fans are thinking they're witnessing history, but the show was just getting started. When Houston got the ball back, ending kind of the third quarter, Toon went 4 for 5, hitting Tajon Henry, Matthew Golden, and Tank Dell again, just matriculating the ball down the field, 75 yards for a touchdown, and you could tell Houston had found something. On the next drive, man, Harris got that read option cooking again until he drops back to pass, and here comes Derek Parrish at DN, got his big mitt up in the air, tipped the pass, intercepted, returned for 20 yards by Nelson Caesar. Toon drops a dime on the next play, and it's 21-21. With less than 30 seconds left, Bubba Baxa drills through the go-ahead field goal. But you would soon learn, do not walk away from this game. In just 23 seconds, Harris marches the Birds down to the Houston 20, and bang! Field goal was good. We're going to overtime. I mean, listen, I don't have time to cover all of the finish of this, but ultimately there were 3 overtimes. Go and watch the finish to this game. Frank Harris finished the game with 337 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 63 yards, and a touchdown on the ground, and they lost. I mean, ultimately, Houston got the dub, but what a freaking game. Neither team had any quit. The Harris-Toon battle down the stretch. They, I think, are probably the best 2 quarterbacks in the state of Texas. What a Lone Star battle. I mean, you could see the look on Dana Holgerson's face. You know, these 2 coaches, him and Jeff Traylor, clearly have a ton of respect for each other, but Holgerson, he could just tell he was just a part of something really special. Now, if there was a more thrilling game than that one, it might have been going on at the exact same time, Wyoming at Tulsa. Listen, the offense looked much better for Wyoming. You might have something with Peasley, but the defense is still really suspect. They did ultimately do what they had to do when they needed it, but Tulsa's quarterback, Davis Brin, threw for 460 yards. Damn. So, on to what I'm sure many of you tuned in for. Number 5, Notre Dame at number 2, Ohio State. I was very impressed. The Notre Dame D-line got tons of pressure. Stroud had to take quick check down routes because he didn't have time to let the longer routes develop. I was a bit concerned about this Notre Dame defense when Foskey gets flagged on the opening touchdown. But ultimately the defense was spectacular Saturday. Now, I told you in the Big Ten preview, everyone's saying the defense is a problem for Ohio State. It's clear now. The Buckeyes' defense is probably better than last year. Whatever issues they do have or they're discussing now certainly stem from the way the offense played in that game, not the defense. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Jackson Smith-Njigba injury. The early knee injury sidelined him for the game, but, he looks like he might be back soon. And they sure need him. I mean, the Irish defense forced Stroud into quick decisions, yes, but also, the other wide receivers dropped a lot of passes. I feel like I might have overrated this wide receiver group. But Notre Dame got something cooking on offense at the start of the second quarter. That Salerno catch, just incredible. Then you cap it off with a fullback over the top for a touchdown, 10-7. I was sweating my pick then. And if I can, let me call out another punter. Notre Dame's punter is a real weapon as well. 3 times in the game, his kick fell dead inside of the 11-yard line. Damn, Mr. John Sott. But back to the first half, Ohio State misses the field goal just before halftime that would have tied it up. Instead, we go into halftime. Notre Dame up 10-7. I mean, I can't express enough how great of a job the Irish defense did against that offense that my numbers had as possibly historic. After both teams traded punts twice in the second half, the Buckeyes settled in on offense. Stroud led Ohio State on a 10-play, 70-yard drive, with Xavier Johnson catching the 24-yard touchdown pass to go up 14-10. Notre Dame would never score again. You know, the Irish may see potential in Tyler Buchner, but he really faded late. Finished the game with just 177 yards passing and 0 pass touchdowns. And this is going on right as Ohio State settles in on Mayon Williams late, and a long drive puts them up 11 points. Notre Dame has some work to do with the quarterback situation, but my real concern is this Ohio State offensive ineptitude. Stroud threw just 2 touchdown passes, and they didn't have a single player rush for over 100 yards. I mean, hey man, Michigan can beat that, even at the Horseshoe. And then we had the number 7 Utah Utes traveling to the Swamp to take on the Florida Gators. Yeah, the Utes offense looked real good between the 20s in the first half, but they just stalled out in the red zone. Rising made some very uncharacteristic missed passes just before halftime when they had a chance to take back the lead. Instead, you go into halftime down 13-14. So then Utah comes out with 6 straight runs to start the second half. There was a clear emphasis to kind of reestablish the line of scrimmage. But that Florida defensive front, with a ton of heart, stopped them with a goal line stand on the opening drive of the second half. I mean, that flipped the entire game upside down. Florida was clearly in the driver's seat at that point. After Florida drove down for a touchdown, Utah went back to bully ball, establishing the line of scrimmage again. And hey, didn't I tell you in our Pac-12 preview, the tight end set of Brant Keithy and Dalton Kincaid, that's a special group, man. They combined for 134 yards and a touchdown. Several of their 11 catches came at very big moments. 4 straight touchdowns out of the gate in the second half, 2 by each of these teams. But ultimately, Utah had the last crack. They had the best opportunity to win, but after driving the Utes 69 yards on 9 plays, with the game on the line, 17 seconds left, my dark horse for the Heisman, Cam Rising, just throws a pick, sealing the win for Florida. Listen, the Gators are in great shape with Billy Napier now. They maybe should get some hype and consideration for playoff contention after this win. I had my questions, but AR-15 and the Gators proved me wrong, just flat out. They played hard and disciplined. It really makes you wonder, what the hell was Dan Mullen doing? And, on a separate note, the Pac-12 is officially dead. Now, a couple of notes on a few other teams playing this last Saturday. Alabama did Alabama things, just workmanlike, very similar to Georgia. Put it away early, cruise control, kept their best players out of injury trouble. Now, Tennessee, they also played on Thursday. They are now on a streak of 4 straight games, scoring 45 or more points. That offense with Hendon Hooker looked fantastic. As far as the Michigan-Colorado State game, you saw the talent out there for Michigan. Second drive, 1 play, 61 yards, Cade McNamara to Roman Wilson. Michigan's ready for the big time, and they've got several more weeks to get things tuned up. It looks like they're going to be starting J.J. McCarthy next week after Cade McNamara started this first game. Eventually, Jim Harbaugh is going to have to make a decision, or maybe he won't like he did last year, and they made the playoff. And for Colorado State, listen, the Rams looked much better than expected. In this kind of a mismatch game, you really have to focus on what they do early, and then do they play hard late. But technically, the technicality of the play and the scheming you want to watch early, because that's going to wear down hard as the game goes on. I think the offense is going to be good in that pro style kind of air raid set, and your defense bowed their back up a couple of times, almost getting an interception on that 3rd and long in the first quarter after your offense just set you up with your backs to the end zone. I think we could say the Rams are headed in the right direction. And USC, 39 new starters, and they beat Rice 66-14. Impressive, yeah, but it's Rice. Last thing, the Florida State at LSU game was sensational, but I think it's an indication that both teams are not good. Florida State dominated the first 3 quarters, but then they just completely fell apart, let LSU all the way back into the game. I'm not sold on Jordan Travis. He came up really small late. On the offense, we got quarterback Will Rogers, Mississippi State, 450 yards and 5 touchdowns through the air as the Bulldogs pulled away early from Memphis, winning 49-23 and avenging that tragic loss from last year where the refs just completely blew the last play of the game. And on defense, how about big Jaquez Evans from Western Kentucky? The Hilltoppers linebacker came up with 14 tackles, 2.5 sacks as they cruised to a dominant 49-17 win at Hawaii. So, what, if any, impact did the action this weekend have on formulating the college football playoff picture? Well, we will narrow it down for you right now. Now, the 4 playoff spots are 85% likely to come from this grouping you're looking at right now. You got 10 of the top 13 teams from the ESPN playoff predictor here, and the remaining teams just frankly have the schedule to be able to pull it off. With Utah and Oregon both losing to an SEC team, this virtually ensures that any one-loss SEC team will get in ahead of a Pac-12 team, which means likely 2 SEC teams are going to be getting in ahead of a Pac-12 team. So, like I said, the Pac-12 is effectively out of playoff consideration at this point. Now, Notre Dame did lose, but they played very well on the road at Ohio State. That defense really was impressive. It's entirely possible that they can work their way back into the playoff picture, but for now, with the loss, we got to drop them out. 3 teams pulled off close victories over teams that they really should have beaten pretty handily. Oklahoma's defense was really suspect after they were one of the best defensive units in the country last year. Pittsburgh's offense and defense struggled to get traction at times, and frankly, they were lucky to pull out the win. And Houston failed to pull away. Ultimately, the 2 teams looked kind of exactly evenly matched, so let's drop them out for this week. Now, we're really down to the nitty-gritty. Only 1 team from the Big 12 will make it, and only 2 teams from the SEC can make it. Baylor did look more impressive than Oklahoma this weekend, and Alabama and Georgia were both much more impressive than A&M. So, say goodbye to the Sooners and the Aggies. Here it is. The three most impressive teams from the weekend. And I chose Ohio State over Baylor, BYU, and Clemson. BYU and Baylor play each other next week. And Clemson, I think, is probably going to lose to Notre Dame in a couple of weeks. The college football playoff has never been entirely comprised of teams from only two conferences. But, I mean, if each of these teams finishes 13-0 or 12-11-1, it's hard to argue that they wouldn't make it. So there you have it. Our Right on Cue college football playoff week 1 predictions. Tell me where I got it right. Tell me where I got it wrong. Send me your feedback. Let me know if I'm missing anything at RightOnQCS on Twitter, RightOnQCS@gmail.com. And let's close things out with a quick look at the upcoming slate of games this weekend. And we get things kicked off right out of the gate. That Louisville at UCF game, going to be on ESPN2 on Friday, is going to be a fun one in the Bounce House in Orlando. And then turn to Saturday. And, you know, you've heard a lot of hype about this Alabama at Texas game, and I'm sure the stadium's going to be packed, but I think Alabama's probably going to run them. I think you know my thoughts on the biggest game of the weekend is probably going to be the Vols traveling to Pittsburgh, especially with Pitt kind of coming up flat a little bit this week, this past Thursday. Tennessee, they might go on the road and they might get them. And then you also have the night game, Baylor at BYU. That one's going to be a phenomenal game. And then my Colorado Buffaloes travel to the Air Force Academy, a game I will be at, me and the boys. My dad's coming too. So come on, Buffs. Pull it together for that one. But with all that being said, you have been watching Right on Cue College Sports. I am your host, Tyson Quiller, and we will get at you next time.